Hello and welcome. Do you need to do some work in Excel, but you're not quite sure how to get started? The first time I used Excel, my manager asked me to type a list of names in it, and for a long time I thought that's all you used it for. But since then, I've learned that there's a lot more you can do in Excel. Before you start creating spreadsheets, here are a few examples of the kinds of things you can keep track of in Excel. Here's an expense report waiting to be filled out. Here's a personal monthly budget that you could use for household expenses. And by the way, see these numbers, $11.95 and $12.36? One of the reasons I've learned to really love Excel is because it can do math for you, and you'll learn more about that later in the course. Here's a weekly time record. And here's a review form for a team member. The thing to keep in mind is that even though all of these spreadsheets looked very different, they all started like this, as a blank spreadsheet. Next, we'll take a closer look at spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are made up of columns, rows, and cells. The columns going across here all have alphabetical headings, A, B, C, D, and so on. The rows going down here all have numerical headings starting at 1, 2, 3, and going on and on. A cell is where one column and one row meet. Here, this is cell A1. Cells are where you type. The alphabetical and numerical headings tell you where you are in a spreadsheet when you click in a cell. You'll learn why this is important next. I'll place the cursor back into cell A1, the first cell in the spreadsheet. Do you notice this black line that's around the cell? That means that this is the active cell, and anything I type will go into this cell. I'll type something arbitrary. Days of the week. Since it's Friday, I'll type Friday. Then I'll press the Enter key to move down one cell, and now you notice the black outline is around this cell, and I'll type Saturday. Now, just as you can press the Enter key to move down one cell, you can press the Tab key to move right one cell, and I'll type Sunday. Oops, typo, Sunday. Now, most of the time, you'll probably type straight down columns or straight across columns, but you don't have to. You can type anywhere you place your cursor. So I'll go over here, and now the cell is active, so what I type will be in this cell, and I'll type Monday. One thing I'd like you to notice is that G for column G is highlighted and 3 for row 3 is highlighted. Now I'm going to move the cursor up to the top above the spreadsheet to an area called the name box. And in the name box it says G3. That's G for column G and 3 for row 3. So that means that the cell address of Monday is G3. Now, if you wonder why that's important, because obviously we can see everything here and easily tell what's in what cell. But imagine that you've got a spreadsheet that's full of hundreds or maybe thousands of pieces of information, and you want to point something out to someone. If you know the cell address, it's a lot easier to get someone to look right where you want them to. And I'll give you a demonstration. I'm going to move the cursor back up to the name box and click in it, which selects the cell address. And I'm going to type in another cell address, but I'll make it a big one. M114393. Now you can use the name box to go to other locations in the spreadsheet just by typing in the cell address and then pressing Enter. And here we are down into cell M114393. Column M is highlighted. Row 114393 is highlighted, and the cell address of this active cell is up here in the name box M114393. Now I'll show you a shortcut to get back up to the top of the spreadsheet. Just click in the name box and I'll type A1 and press Enter, and there we are back up at the top. Another reason cell addresses are important is that you'll use them to do formulas, which you'll learn about in another section of this course. Next up, the ribbon. Up above the spreadsheet is a large bar. It's called the ribbon. On it are the buttons and the commands that you'll use to tell Excel what you want to do. At the very top of the ribbon are tabs, starting with the File tab and the Home tab and the Insert tab and some others. Which tab you use depends on what kind of task you're doing in Excel. In this course, we'll look primarily at the Home tab and the File tab because that's where a lot of the commands are for everyday tasks. And I'll give you an example. Say that I want to create a new spreadsheet to work on a different project. I'd click File, then I'd click New. Blank Workbook is already selected for me, and I'd move my cursor over to the right and then down to the Create button, and I'd click Create. There I have it, brand new clean spreadsheet. Down here at the very bottom of the spreadsheet, you'll see 3 tabs, Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3. Every blank workbook automatically comes with 3 separate spreadsheets for you to work with. Well, that's it for this section of the course. In the next section, we'll look at doing simple math in Excel. The first thing I learned about working with numbers in Excel is that you can use Excel to do basic math, to add and subtract, to multiply and divide. So the next time you're working in Excel and you need a number, you don't have to reach for a calculator or pencil and paper, just use Excel. To do math, you create simple formulas using an equal sign and a math operator, a plus or a minus sign, an asterisk or forward slash. Here I'll show you what I mean. I'll click in cell A1 and I'll add 2 numbers, 89 and 23. So equal sign, 89, plus sign, 23. And I'll press enter to get my result, which is 112. By the way, if you ever wonder if there's a formula behind a number in Excel, just click in the cell with the number and I'll move my cursor up above the spreadsheet to an area called the formula bar. And there's the formula that I just typed. Now I'll click in cell A2 and I'll subtract those same numbers, equal 89 minus sign 23, and press enter, and the result is 66. I'll multiply equals 89 asterisk for times 23, and the result is 2047. And finally I'll divide equals 89 forward slash 23, and the result, as you can see, has quite a few numbers after the decimal point. You can adjust that if you want to. I'll just click in that cell and then I'll move my cursor up to the ribbon to where it says number. Then these 2 buttons, the first one increases the amount of numbers after a decimal point, and this button, which I'll use, decreases the numbers after a decimal point. So if you'll keep your eye on cell A4, I'll click the button once, and now we have 1 less number. I'll click again, and again, and again, and I'll leave it at 3.87. Next, I'll show you how to add these numbers up. To get the total of these numbers, I'll click in cell A5, or try to. Okay, A5. Now, obviously, I created the formulas to get these numbers, but to get the total, I'm going to let Excel create the formula for me. I'll move my insertion point up to the ribbon to where it says Editing. Then I'll move up to this button called the Auto Sum or the Sum button, and I'll click the button. Now I'll move back to the spreadsheet to explain what you see here. This is a marquee around all the numbers that are being added up. Sometimes we call those dancing ants. And then to see this a little more clearly, I'll move the cursor up to the formula bar. And we've got the equal sign as before, but this time there's a function which is kind of a preset formula called sum, which added the numbers up for me, or will add them when I get the total. Then these parentheses are around the cell references A1 through A4, which is also called the argument for the formula. And I'll press enter to get this total, and here it is, 2228.87. Next, I'll show you some of the other things you can do with the AutoSum button. First, I want to work on a different spreadsheet than this one. I'll move my cursor down to the very bottom of the spreadsheet where it says Sheet 1, and here, Sheet 2, I'll click this tab to change spreadsheets. And I've got some numbers already here for total sales for West and East in columns A and column B. This time I'd like to, instead of getting a sum, I'd like to get the average of the numbers in this column. So I'll move my cursor back up to where it says Editing. And this time when I point to the AutoSum button, instead of clicking the button, I'll click the arrow next to it. As you can see, it says Sum, but it also says Average, Count Numbers, and Maximum and Minimum. Since I want average, I'll click that. And going back to the spreadsheet, here's my formula, but this time the formula has the function called average in it, and I'll press enter. And there's the result. The average of these numbers is 1496. Now I'd also like the average in column B, and I could just take the same steps that I just did, but instead I'll show you another way to get a formula, which is to copy one that already exists. So we know we've got a formula here. I'm going to move the cursor to the bottom right of the cell until the cursor becomes this black plus sign. I'll depress the left mouse button and then I'll just drag to the right. I'll release the mouse button. There I've got my average 3412. Now I'm going to show you what happened by looking up in the formula bar above the spreadsheet. As before, we've got the equal sign and the average function, but this time Excel automatically changed the formula argument. Instead of A2, we've got B2. Instead of A10, we've got B10. I think that's pretty cool. And I'll show you one last thing about math, is that up till now I've been doing formulas at the bottom of the columns, but you can also do a formula to the side. So I'll click here and say that I want the average of these two numbers. So I'll just go back up to the AutoSum button, click the arrow, and press Average. This time the marquee goes across the row instead of down the column. And here's my formula, and I'll press Enter, and my average is 4362. This is the end of this section of the course. In the practice, at the end of the course, I'll show you a math shortcut. Up next, creating and formatting column titles. Column headings A, B, C, D, and so on, and row headings 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on tell you where you are when you're typing, but they don't tell you or your readers what the text in the columns mean. Eventually, I'm going to enter some sales data for AdventureWorks, a company that sells sporting goods. But first, I'll type the column titles so that everyone will know what the information in the columns mean. I'll place my cursor in cell A1, and my first title is Product Category. Now, this looks a little odd, as though the contents in cell A1 is spilling over into cell B1. It's not actually the case. It's kind of an illusion. And I'll fix how this looks after I've typed the rest of the titles. I'll press the Tab key to move to cell B1 and type the next title, which is Customer Name, Tab, Sales Amount, and Tab, Year. Now to fix this, the first thing I need to do is to select all the cells that are affected. So I'll place my cursor in cell A1. I'll depress the left mouse button and then I'll drag. The next thing I'll do is move my cursor up to where it says Cells, then Format, and I'll click the arrow on the Format and move the cursor down to Auto Fit Column Width, which simply means that Excel will make the columns the right size. If you'll keep your eye on the column titles, I'll go ahead and click this and you'll see what happens. Excel has made the text fit into all the columns, and so now it's readable. Next, I'll show you how to format the titles. My cells are still selected, and the next thing I want to do is to apply some formatting to them to make them stand out just a little bit more. I'm going to move the cursor up to where it says Styles on the ribbon. Then I'll point at Cell Styles and I'll click the arrow on the button. What I've got here is a gallery of different kinds of styles that I could apply to the cells. The nice thing about the gallery is that I've moved my cursor over a style. You can see it in the spreadsheet and get a preview of what something would look like before you pick it. First of all, I'm going to try heading 1. Now if you look at the cells A1 through D1, you can see the style applied. It looks a little big to me. I don't think I want it. But by the way, if you did choose this style, it would be easy to once again change the cell width so that you could read everything in the cells. Because the style's so large, it's making the text bigger. I think I'll try something else. 60% accent 1. If you look in the cells, that's okay, but it's a little pale looking. I'm going to move the cursor down one more in the gallery and try accent 1. I think I like that. That just about, it's kind of bold, but not too much so. So I'll just click accent 1. And there I've got the formatting in my spreadsheet. One last thing I'm going to do is I want to center each title within the cell, and there'll be very little change because right now these columns aren't very wide, but I like to center them, and also an awful lot of people center things, so this is a way to show you where that button is. I point the cursor to alignment and then up here to this button, which is the center button. Now if you look at the cells as I apply this, you'll barely see anything happen, but here goes. I'll click it and they just moved a very slight amount. That's the end of this part of the course. Next, you'll learn some quick ways to enter information in a spreadsheet. I've typed a few entries in my AdventureWorks spreadsheet. Some things, like mountain bikes and road bikes, will be repeated again and again, and occasionally I'll type a customer's name more than once. If I want to, I can let Excel complete the entries that are repeated over and over again for me instead of typing them myself. I'll place the cursor in cell A4, and the next product I want to type is road bikes. I'll type R, and the highlighted text is what Excel entered for me, guessing that after the R I wanted to type road bikes. Since that's correct, I'll press the Tab key, and now I'll type the customer's name, Abigail Henderson. Her name looks just slightly too long for the width of this column, and I'll fix the column width in just a bit. Now I'll type in the amount, $3,578.27, and press Tab. Now notice, as I type the year in just a second, Excel won't try to complete that for me. Years you have to type yourself. So I'll type in 2010, and then I'll place the cursor in cell A5. This time I want to type mountain bikes. I'll type the M, and the highlighted text is what Excel filled in for me. Now by the way, Excel won't always guess right, and I'll give you an example of that in the practice session at the end of the course. I'll press Tab. Abigail is also buying mountain bikes, so I'll type A, and Excel correctly filled in the rest of her name for me. Now I'm going to fix this column width so that her name is more readable. In an earlier movie, I showed how to do that using the ribbon, and this time I'll show you a mouse shortcut. I move the cursor up to the top to the very edge of column B, and the cursor turns into a 4-headed pointer. Then I'm going to click twice or double click, and now the column's wider. Next, I'll show you how to let Excel enter currency symbols for you. Sales amounts are listed in column C. If you want currency symbols for the numbers, you can type them in yourself, or you can let Excel enter them for you. First, I need to select the cells that I want Excel to format. So I'll click in cell C2, then depress the left mouse button and drag down. Now I'm also going to drag down cells that I haven't typed in yet, because eventually I will, and this way I'll pre-format the cells with the currency symbol. I'll release the left mouse button, move the cursor up to where it says number, and then move to this little tiny symbol. It's called the dialog box launcher. Anytime you see this symbol, you'll know that more commands are available, and you get them by clicking. The Format Cells dialog box is revealed with the Number tab showing, and there's a category of different things that I could select. In this case, I want currency, so click that. Then in the symbol box, it says none, but I want the $ for the United States since that's where I am, and I'll click OK. Now click to deselect the cells. As you can see, the currency symbol has been added. Now, I'll type in an empty cell so that you can see that Excel will automatically apply the currency format. Type in my next number, 4,567.32, and press Tab. And if you look at cell C5, you can see that the currency symbol is there. Now later, if I needed to apply a different currency symbol, I just select by dragging the numbers and then go back up to where it says number, but this time point at the $ and the arrow next to it and click the arrow next to it. And here are the different kinds of currency symbols that I could choose from. I'll just click in the spreadsheet to get rid of that menu since I don't need to change anything now. Up next, how to let Excel automatically fill in a series, such as the days of the week or the months of the year. First, I'll change the spreadsheet that I'm working on. I'll move my cursor down to the very bottom of the spreadsheet to where it says Sheet 1, and I'll click Sheet 2. Sometimes you might find yourself typing certain things over and over again, like the days of the week, for example. Well, you don't have to type the list, just start it out and let Excel finish it for you. So for example, I'll start with Monday. Then I'll move my cursor until it becomes the black plus sign, and I'll depress the left mouse button and drag down. And there's a screen tip that tells me that Tuesday will come next. Then as I drag Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on, and this will also tell me where I want to stop, which is at Sunday. I'll release the mouse button, and the list is filled in, and the only thing I had to type was Monday. I'm going to widen this column so that Wednesday is more readable. I'll move the insertion point up and double click, and there you can read Wednesday. You can do the same thing with the days of the month, but say I don't want all the 12 months, I just want the second quarter, which starts with March. So type March, move my cursor until it becomes the black plus sign, depress the left mouse button and drag April, May. And you can do numbers. Say that you wanted a series such as 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'll type 2, but in this case I need to give Excel a lot more of a hint as to what I want. So press enter, type 4, and I need to press enter again. Then I'll drag, depressing the left mouse button, release the mouse button, move the cursor till it's a plus sign, and drag down. And I could go for as long as I want, but I'll just stop here at 38, and there's my series. In the practice, at the end of the course, you'll have a chance to work with other kinds of series. That's the end of this part of the course. Up next is adding and deleting rows and columns to your spreadsheets. I need to add a new column to my AdventureWorks spreadsheet. There should be a country column to the right of customer name. To add a new column, you just click in the cell to the right of where you want the column. Since I want the column to be the right of column B, I'll click in a cell in column C. Then I'll move the cursor to where it says Cells, then to Insert. Then I'll click the arrow next to Insert, move the cursor to where it says Insert Sheet Columns, and click. And there's my new column. Notice that the formatting for the column titles persists in the new column, so I'll type the name, Country, Sales amount, which was formerly column C, is now column D, and year, which had been column D, is now column E. By the way, if you end up putting a column in the wrong place, it's no trouble to get rid of it. Just be sure that the cursor is in a cell in the column you want to delete, then move the cursor up to cells again, then this time to delete, then click the arrow, move the insertion point to where it says delete sheet columns. Since this column is where I want it to be, I'll just click to get out of this menu. Next, how to add new rows. I also need to add 2 new rows under Christy's name. Her name is on row 2, and to add rows under, I just click in the cell under Christy's name. Then I move the cursor to where it says cells. Then to insert, click the arrow on insert, move the cursor to insert sheet rows, and click. And there's my new empty row under Christy's name. Now I need 2 rows, and I could just follow the same steps, but instead I'll show you a keyboard shortcut. As long as I haven't taken any other actions since I inserted the new row, I can press the F4 key on my keyboard to repeat the very last thing I did. So I'll press F4 once, and now I've got another row. And so that I can demonstrate to you how to delete rows, I'll add another row that I really don't need by pressing F4. To delete a row, just make sure that the cursor is in the row you want to delete. Then I'll move the cursor to cells again, and up to delete, and press the arrow, and then click delete sheet rows. And now I've got 2 rows under Christy's name. Next, how to add more spreadsheets. Every workbook comes with 3 spreadsheets. If you want more than that, though, it's easy to increase the number. I'll move the cursor to the bottom of the spreadsheet where it says Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3. Then I'll move the cursor to the right to this button, which you can use to add spreadsheets. I'll click the button, and now notice that I've got Sheet 4. I'll click the button again to get Sheet 5. Now, it's as easy to delete spreadsheets as it is to add them. To do that, just click on the sheet that you want to delete, then right-click by depressing the right mouse button, which reveals a menu, and then click Delete. Now I could click Delete again, or I could use that keyboard shortcut F4, so I'll just press F4 to repeat the last action I took, and I'll get rid of Sheet 3, because I really only need 1 sheet in this spreadsheet. F4. Now watch what happens though when I click F4 to repeat my last action, deleting a spreadsheet, because this sheet has got data on it. So click F4, and Excel is telling me that data's there and is just checking to be sure I really want to delete this. I do, so I'll press Delete. Now I'm down to Sheet 1. Sheet 1 isn't very descriptive or helpful for anyone who was looking at this spreadsheet and wondered what it was about. So you can rename any spreadsheet by clicking on the sheet name, then right-click, move the cursor up to where it says Rename, and now the name is highlighted. So the title I type will change the highlighted text, and I'll type Adventure Works, oops, a typo, Sales Data, and press the Enter key. That's the end of this part of the course. In the next portion of the course, you'll see how to keep column titles in sight as you scroll down a big spreadsheet. I've entered more information in the Adventure Works spreadsheet. There are more columns and more rows. If I want to take a look at those rows, I'll grab this scroll bar on the right-hand side of the spreadsheet by clicking on it to kind of grab it. Then I'll scroll down. The first thing that happens is that the column titles in row 1 disappear. So I might wonder, is mountain bikes the product category or the product name? So I scroll back up to see. Well, to eliminate scrolling back and forth to see column titles, you can freeze the first row in place. To do that, I need to switch the tab on the ribbon. Right now we're on the Home tab. I'm going to move my cursor to where it says View and click the View tab. Now where it says Window, there's a Freeze Panes command, and I'll click the arrow and then move the cursor to where it says Freeze Top Row. You see this black line? That kind of line tells you that something's been frozen on the spreadsheet, in this case the top row. I'll grab the scroll bar again by clicking on it and scroll down, and now no matter how far I scroll down you can see the column titles. Now if for some reason you wanted to get rid of the freeze, all you have to do is go to where it says Window, Freeze Panes, click the arrow, and then click Unfreeze Panes, and the black line disappears, and once again as I scroll the column titles disappear from sight. In the practice you'll learn a bit more about freezing panes. Next is preparing your spreadsheet to print. I'm ready to print a copy of my AdventureWorks spreadsheet. I'll show you a few of Excel's printing options. To do that, I'll move from the Home tab to the File tab by clicking File. Then I'll move my cursor down to where it says Print and click that. There are some options here on the left you can set, and over here to the right is Print Preview. It shows you exactly what your spreadsheet will look like when it's printed. Now I can tell by looking at the column titles here that not every column is on the spreadsheet. So I'm going to set an option to see if I can change that to get everything on one sheet. So I'll move the cursor down here to where it says Portrait Orientation, which is what the spreadsheet is in now. Click the arrow and I'll select Landscape. Now the orientation is changed and I can see that all my columns are on the page, which is exactly what I want. I didn't want to have to print it with some of the columns on one page and others on another page. Now there are a few more options I'd like to set. If you notice, the grids between the cells aren't on the sheet, and I'd also like to have the row headings, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the column headings A, B, C, and so on printed. So I'll move the cursor down to the bottom of the page where it says Page Setup and click that. That opens the Page Setup dialog box, and I'm going to click the Sheet tab, and under Print it says Guidelines. I'll select that, and Row and Column Headings. I'll select that, and then I'll click OK. And now we can see that the grids are here and will be printed, and also the row headings and the column headings. And all that's left to do is for me to click Print. Well, that's the end of the course. In the practice, if you have time to take it, I really recommend it. You'll get to try out some of the things that you've learned in the course, as well as a few new things. Goodbye for now.